Okay, so it's 6 o'clock. I think we've got a couple of participants, so I'm going to start the session. So thank you all for joining this webinar on user stories and BDD. Hope everyone's keeping well and staying safe. Couple of points before I start the session. We will take questions towards the end of the webinar. You can type all your questions in the chat window, and we'll collate that and probably try and answer as many as possible depending on the time. Feel free to type whatever questions you have. It could be related about Agile, it could be related about Scrum or anything. There's no problem, and we will try and reach out to you and answer any questions you have. We will also do a couple of activities in this webinar. You may require your phone or a mobile browser to just access the few things, or you can also type your answers in the chat window. So my name is Mohammed Rowther. I am a ScrumAtScale trainer and an Agile coach. I've been in this industry for nearly 20 years, worked with a variety of companies, helping in delivering product services and also in Agile transformation. Some of the clients I've worked for are Sky, Vodafone, Orange, and you can see loads. There's quite a few companies there, and most of them have been waterfall and agile. I have a mix of experience. I've been a tester, I've been a developer, I've been a scrum master. So I've been through all the stages and all the areas where it's been tough and challenging. And till today, I keep learning about, and it's a learning journey. So I just stop. I don't stop, studying. So my key area is to work and to explore things. So today, the topic is about user stories and BDD. Let's look at one of the biggest problems in software development. We know the traditional process has been there for quite some time, but one of the biggest problems is all about the traditional process, the documentation. Do you all agree with that? It's the documentation that talks about what we want. It's the requirements. But what happens in most of the cases? We get these documents, everybody looks at it, and each one imagines different things. They even sign off the document and they start building something that's totally different. Now, when we start building these products, it totally differs from what the document mentions and what we've built. So there is a lack of shared understanding and also bad requirements. And then what we do, we start pointing towards this document and saying, this is really a bad document. This is not really written properly. Or we start pointing to the person who's looked at it, who's done it. But what is the problem? The documents describe what requirements are there, but they do not talk about why we need it. What we built was completely wrong because we went against it. We did something totally different. Though a set of people agreed, they started signing off and they came up with an agreement, but then what we built was totally a different thing. Now, this is about 50% of the problem. Misunderstanding, the document is only 50%, but the 50% of the problem is all about wasting the time, the energy, and the money to build such things from the document. We completely go wrong. We start building the wrong thing, we start delivering the wrong thing, and we don't know what we have delivered. Why is that? Because these documents, they describe only the requirement. They don't talk about why we need these things. This is the biggest challenge. This is one of the challenges in any kind of environment. So I want to understand from everybody there, what is your biggest challenge that you've been facing in the organization to become agile? Or if you're following waterfall, what is your biggest challenge? I want you to take about a minute and post your answers on that link, span.nurava.com, and use the code. Or you can also share your answers in the chat window. Take about a minute. Can you please, just type a few words about the biggest challenge you've been facing? That's the timer. So you got a minute to do that. You can write any of the challenges you're facing. The biggest challenge that you faced or that you want to overcome. Probably it could be about agile, it could be about the one you're facing at the moment. Please type in the chat window, or you can use the link span.neurava.com/qs and type in the code 7014446839, and I can have a look at the answers maybe towards the end of the class. We have a couple of seconds to go. Please feel free to type in. You can use any color code you want. The post-it notes has different colors. You can post anything. So I can see a few things coming up. Good. Okay, so let's move on. Now, I spoke about why, but how do I describe this why? We have to stop writing these perfect documents. We try and spend so much time on these things, right? And let's start telling stories. When I say telling stories, it's about getting together, talk about a problem, and look what we're trying to solve. And who's going to use this? Who's going to use your product? Who's going to use your software? Who's going to use your services? And why are they going to use it? So this is something you have to focus on. So you got to get together. The collaboration is what is key. Arrive at a solution and build that shared understanding along the way. That's important. Now, the idea of telling stories is important because you're going to generate that interest and that vision in the listener's mind. So that's the key. My thing is stop and pause. Everybody pause for a minute. Read that sentence there, what I've spoken about. Stories get their name not from how they're supposed to be written, but how they're supposed to be used. How are you going to use it? What are your end users going to do? If you're building a product now, in 2 years' time or 1 year's time, how is it going to be used? Think about that. The behavior, that's important. Try and step away from the traditional process model. Requirements is not equal to stories writing. When I talk about stories writing, it's you have to get together, have this rich discussions about your stories, start telling them. If you're going back towards your traditional way of writing documents and building those requirements, then you're going to forget about the why. Now, the story leads to a conversation. This is a reference card. This is the way you write a story. It's a template. All this covers is who, what, and why. What does who, what, and why stand for? Who is the person? Who is it? The role. And the what is the action. What actions are the users going to take? And why? What are the business value? So when you write a story, it should be as a role, I would like to be able to take some actions to achieve a business value. That's the key. This card will then lead to a discussion. So the point of using the stories written like this is to create a face-to-face conversation about what is required from the user's perspective. And with that, we'll have a few conditions of satisfaction. So each story will have an acceptance criteria. We call them conditions of satisfaction. If I was going to build something, I would have a simple journey or a simple functionality that satisfies a few things. And if all the satisfaction is done, and if it's accepted, the product owner could go through this. A clear description or list of outcomes is what we have to look at. And that will prove your story is acceptable. Quickly, I want everybody to come up with a sample story. It could be anything. It could be a goal. It could be a goal for the day, or it could be a goal for the future. It could be about you, why you're here. You can write a story in the format with who, what, and why. You can post the answers in the chat window, or you can also use a system to submit your answers. Just take a minute and think about why you're here and what is your goal, and come up with a story. For example, as a user, as a trainer, or as a coach, I want to attend tomorrow's webinar so that I can achieve some great or gain some knowledge, so that I have a purpose for doing that. So you can come up with a simple story. Take a minute, think about it, and you can write your answers in your chat window. Come up with anything simple, whatever you feel like. It could be a goal. It could be any thing that you've done this morning that you want to express. So just a sample story. Use the who, use the what, and use the why. Let's take a few seconds before we get the answers. I can see quite a few responses. Good. Just use the who, the what, and the why. It could be about yourself. It could be about anything you want to express, or your future plans, your future journey, what you would like to acquire in the next few weeks when this lockdown has happened. It could be anything. We have a couple of seconds before we move on to the next slide. Okay. So I spoke about the card, the story card. Now I want to explain to you about a concept called 3 C's. Now this is adapted from Ron Jeffries, and the concept is 3 C's. It's a card, the conversation, and confirmation. The card could be any index card, or it could be any statement that you've written. Now you could write that on your post-it. It's something you want to see. It could be about you. It could be about a product or software. You write those things in a bunch of cards. And the conversation, you get together to have a conversation with your product owners, with your team members about the product, about the software, about your goal, what you want to build, what you want to do. And the confirmation is a few criterias. How am I going to satisfy these things? How am I going to achieve my goal? What are the things I need to satisfy? It's your condition of satisfaction. So the card, the conversation, and the confirmation is the key aspect for conversation. So it's about having the conversation, it's about capturing the conversation, and automating this conversation. Now, this is from Liz. I know everybody would have heard about this concept called 3 Amigos. We also call that a discovery workshop. Now, in that workshop, the goal of the meeting is to generate real-world examples. Talk about things that's happening, what's going to happen to your product, if the product was existing, or if the software was already there. What if I'm building something, if I need to assume that it's already in the market, and what's going to happen if that product was going to be used by a few users? How is it going to be useful? What is its purpose? What is the purpose? Now, in that meeting, the goal of the meeting is to generate these real-world examples and understand and come and try and get those executable specifications, we call it, or high-level examples. That's where BDD comes into picture. BDD is about implementing the software by describing its behavior. That's why it's called behavior driven development from the perspective of its user. The main focus of BDD is about communication and expressing the behavior. Now let's look at why BDD. This is a statistics from Standish Group. And if you look at this graph, you can see that nearly 30% of the projects are successful, and the remaining have been either cancelled or they've been late or over budget. Now, what is the main reason for this? Everything boils down to one thing. It's a communication. And the communication boils down to your requirements and the way you get things, the way things have been documented. It's about finding the places of misunderstanding and filling it with understanding. Now, most of you would be thinking that BDD is a testing tool. No, it's a collaboration tool. It's more a collaboration tool than a testing tool. Yes, it is used in the testing aspects, but first thing is, it is from an end-to-end perspective, it is a collaboration tool. It starts from the beginning with the business, with your product owners, with your business analyst, with the technical team. Everybody sits together. They all discuss. They all have the conversation. You begin with a user story. You have a few acceptance criteria, and these acceptance criteria can be testable. So your stories should follow an invest criteria. When I say invest, it's about how your stories have been written. They have a model. I stands for independent, negotiable, and if it's valuable, if it's estimable, and if it's small and it's testable. Now with this, you have to take into the 3 C's: the cards, the communications, the conversations, and the collaboration. You have your tests written in the BDD format. So I'm going to go through that in the next few slides. You write a test that's failing, you refactor, and it passes. And all this gets into your automated test suite system, where you have a continuous flow of tests running and your story is complete and done. All this has to happen with complete collaboration from the non-technical teams to the technical teams, with the developers and testers working hand in hand. So this is the whole flow of a BDD technique. Now, how do we communicate? Very simple structure. Given, when, and then. Now, this is called Cucumber, and the language that you use is Gherkin. So you follow a very simple structure. Given some sort of context, when some event occurs, then the outcome is this. We are focusing on the outcome. We are focusing on how the system is going to behave when you put that through a certain condition. You could use any kind of tools to do this. You also have a bit of code that's written behind this. It could be in Ruby, Java, any language that you want to do. But this simple given, when, then context can be understood from the business to the non-business areas. Everybody could understand this because it's in simple English. Cucumber helps to build the bridge between technical and non-technical members of the team. So the given, when, then is the syntax, and that's the Cucumber language. If you look at the advantages, and if you look at what exactly it talks about, the main thing is communication, the bridge that it builds. And then it expresses behavior. The behavior is the way the product or the software that it works, the way things work. And it's in a common language, in a simple language that everybody can understand. It's what you're going to build and how it's going to look when your customers use it. It also becomes a living documentation. You don't have to write hundreds of papers of documents. You don't have to have your traditional process of having loads of documentation stored there. No, this is a living documentation. It is like an acceptance test and an executable specification. The last thing is it builds trust. And that's the key. It's the source of truth because everything comes from one source. So this becomes a single point of contact and a single point of reference for the entire team. So the entire process, it shows exactly what the application is supposed to do. That's the key thing. So we spoke about the way the stories needs to be written. It's about telling stories. It's about talking about the conversation, collaboration, the behavior, and how we can apply this behavior-driven development within this environment. I want to give you an example of a feature, a simple example. This is the way you can write your test. A simple scenario like a Google search, given I am on the Google screen. So it's the context you're talking about. And if I'm going to do some sort of action, or when I'm going to click do some action, what happens? What's the result? And this piece of code, this piece of line can be interpreted in any language you want. It can be Java, it can be Ruby, and you write your functionality. You can automate APIs, you can automate your UI specifications, your UIs, your mobile applications, anything you want. And also, you can have multiple scenarios running through this. We have a scenario outline that can do multiple checks for a test. So we are going through an end-to-end process, complete from the time you're getting your requirements, that's your stories. Let's leave the documents, that's from the traditional process. We want to be truly agile. So everything is in place for you to start working towards this goal. I know a lot of companies struggle with agile. And one of the biggest struggle is getting a proper requirement. That's your backlog, your product backlog. That's because of the misunderstanding, not having this face-to-face conversation. The communication is missing. The collaboration between the teams. The product backlog is maintained by the product owner, but there should be enough conversation, communication between the product owner, the team, the stakeholders, the customers. That's when you get the complete understanding of what needs to be built and why we are building it. Always think about the goal. The goal is key. The team focuses and commits towards the goal that it needs to achieve. Starting from the sprint goal and all the product that increments towards that is going to be your main vision. And that's the what and the why you're building it. Now, behavior-driven development is a game changer for many agile teams. A lot of teams have accelerated. The velocity has increased because of this. You use it, you do it properly, your Scrum works, your BDD works, your automation works, your team should collaborate. Your developers, testers should work hand in hand. We don't want to see this mini waterfall, right? Most of the companies, most of the organization, after the sprint planning, you have the developers and testers walking towards the north and walking towards the south. And then they catch up towards the end of the sprint, and all the cards and everything is given to the testers to start working. You're building a mini waterfall. This is not what we want, right? We want a collaborative environment. Work through those cards, work through those acceptance criteria together. Write upfront tests. Look at the specification, have that collaboration. So BDD helps in better communication. Have that, the collaboration. And Focusing on a lot of documents? No. Your living documentation is your specification, your cucumber tests. That should be sufficient. Build the right thing and you test the right thing. It also improves a better coordination between multiple teams. So if you have a lot of teams working together, you can have that improve that coordination. You can have a squad A, squad B, squad C, but you can all work together, share that knowledge, share that experience. One team learns something from the other team. It's not a competition. So if you have several Scrum teams, work together to learn what is the reason for this team to accelerate. Can we learn something from them? That's important. Automate the acceptance test. The automation results can go back to your product owner, can go back to the business, because it's in simple English. Knows what was built and why we built it. It's about the communication, collaboration, living documentation. Build the right thing and test the right thing and improve that coordination and focus on automating the acceptance test. Now, this will minimize mistakes, reduce errors, and will ensure a high quality product is reached to the users. That's your goal. If your delivery is faster, if your cycles are faster, it's going to improve, it's going to increase your revenue, it's going to bring profit to your company, and your share price is going to go high. And that's going to add value to everybody in the company. That's the key. I want to talk about the user story mapping workshop we are doing on 2nd May. It's about talking about the mapping, about stories, how things can be mapped, how you can build releases. It is a virtual online course. It's a one-day course, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. UK time zone. I'm going to facilitate that with Femi, who's an Agile Scrum trainer. And Efficient Agile is going to collaborate with ODIC, and we're going to come up with this workshop. It's going to be highly interactive and collaborative. I would want Femi to talk a few things. He's one of the trainers. He's in the call. So Femi, do you want to just introduce yourself?
So, can you hear me?
Yep, clear.
Okay, wait. Bear with me a second. So, my name is Femi Shinoga. I've been in the IT industry since the mid-90s, and also started my Agile career far back as early as 2007. I've worked in various domains: banking, logistics, retail, oil and gas, telecommunications, manufacturing, and government. And at the moment, I am, how would I say, I help organizations transform their ways of working. So they might be working in a specific method, and I come in there and I sit there and I have a sit down with their CEOs and look for better ways of working for their organization and see how the organization can transform. I've got various experiences in various frameworks and mindsets, and I've got various certifications from Scrum Alliance to ScrumAtScale and International Scrum Institute. So we'll be looking forward to seeing a lot of you come May the 2nd. Over to you, Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you, Femi. So you can get in touch. The details are there. You can email us at info@efficientagile.com. And we're going to have a very collaborative way of working. We've got a lot of diagrams. We've got visual facilitation that takes place. So you can see that at the back. So we've got a lot of Miko Blue stuff. It's all hand-drawn. So you learn the concepts through visual facilitation. Right. Let's go. Let's move on to a couple of questions. Femi, do you want to read a few questions? We can answer a few of them.
Yeah, we
Fine.
only got, I'm a bit surprised. We only have one question that was asked. So if anybody wants to ask more questions, please do. The only question that we got was who writes the acceptance criteria?
Who writes the acceptance criteria? That's a fantastic question. The acceptance criteria, it can it comes from the product owner. It's the vision that he has, but it can also be contributed, modified by the team. The team can work along with the product owner and help to modify the story and the acceptance criteria based on that. But the vision and everything comes. The source is from the product owner's vision from the stakeholders. So remember, the requirements and everything comes from there.
We have another question. What's
Yep.
the difference between TDD, BDD, and ATDD?
Okay, so BDD is an extension of TDD. So when I talk about TDD, it's test-driven development. It's more at the unit level, not to do with the spec level. So now when you want to look at a TDD kind of a code or something, it's not going to be like given. It's not going to be the simple language. It's going to be more of your Java or any technical language that you've written. It's more focused towards the dev orientation. So it's towards the unit level and the integration level and component level. BDD is a high level specification. It's written in a simple language. You drive your BDD test through a language that you want to implement it to automate it. So for example, it could be Ruby, it could be Java, it could be any language that you prefer. It could be Python as well. It could be anything that you are comfortable in. So, and the BDDs, the specification will be understood by anybody. It could be anyone who's non-technical who can take it. Even the business users, the product owners, the stakeholders can have a look at your results and understand. Yes, this is a flow that we expected. This is what we wanted to build. So it's easy to understand. So TDD, BDD. So BDD is an extension towards TDD. And 88.
Also,
Yep,
okay.
go on. Sorry,
No,
what
no,
was
I was gonna ask you about ADD because that too was asked.
So that's the acceptance driven development. It's more at the acceptance layer. It is only towards the end. It's not at the all the layers of your code. So for example, it doesn't talk about the unit level, the component. It's towards the acceptance level. But using BDD would satisfy both. That's it. So BDD should be sufficient for you to go through all the areas. And when you have your story card written, your story is runs through all the layers. When you write a story, don't split your story in a fashion that the API story should be different, the front end should be different. No, it has to go through the entire stack. It has to talk from the UI, the data layers, the API, the business logic, and everything. So a story has to flow through that layer. It shouldn't be like I'll have a story for the front end, I'll have a story for my back end, and I'll have a team for front end, I'll have a team for back end. No, it has to go through the entire stack. You can run your BDD through the entire stack. Your story has to flow through the entire stack. That's important.
Another question that's been asked, we're getting quite an influx of questions right now. Is
Sure,
that
yeah.
should the user story be written by all members of the Scrum team or just the product owner or business analyst?
The user stories can be written, can be contributed. Who can contribute? Everybody can contribute. Let me show you this diagram. If everybody can see this diagram. Yeah. So this is your product backlog. This product backlog, you have a product owner who owns the product backlog. Anybody can contribute to this product backlog. All the items can come from the Scrum team, your customers, stakeholders, anybody can contribute to it. But remember one thing, the product owner owns the priority. Based on the business value, he sorts them. So that's the key. You can contribute. You want to contribute to your product backlog, you can contribute. It will go to the list. It becomes a wish list. And then you start refining it. before it goes to a proper product backlog. So you make it one backlog with the wish list that is there, you refine it, the product backlog is there, and then that goes, the ready product backlog. That's your DOR, definition of ready. That goes into the sprint backlog. That goes for the discussion in the sprint planning. So anybody can add. There's no restriction about it.
So next question of that we have is, if we do not have a defined product owner and responsibilities on the business analyst, then how can the acceptance criteria be defined?
If you don't have a product owner at all, or
let me read the question again. If we do not have a defined product owner,
yeah,
and the responsibility is on the business analyst, then how can the acceptance criteria be defined?
Okay. Now, the business analyst is playing the role of the product owner there. You don't have a dedicated product owner. First thing is, try and pitch for a product owner who can understand the what and the vision. That's the key. If the business analyst is playing the role of a product owner, then you have to work towards this. You need to understand the roles and responsibilities of a product owner and act as a product owner. Try and understand the vision and build your roadmap towards that vision. First thing. And if you're writing the acceptance criteria and you have the authority to do it, and if that is acceptable by your head of product team or your chief product owner, then it's fine. There's no problem. But if you're doing it only for your team and there's no visibility and it's not going up the ladder, it's not going to your head of product owner, then please, you need to escalate that or talk about it and find out what is the exact role and what needs to be done. If you have written the acceptance criteria by assumptions, you need to be careful about that. It's a caution. Try and address this to your management and understand the vision, understand the what. Then discuss the acceptance criteria. You can sit with the team, you can discuss with your team members, with the technical team. When you're doing a product backlog refinement, you can always modify that, you can write it, there's no problem about that. But make sure it focuses towards your vision. This is your vision, it needs to go there.
So next one up is, how effective is BDD on a greenfield project where underlying technical infrastructure is in place?
BDD can work anywhere. Greenfield, if it's a restaurant, if it's any project, API or hospital, anywhere, BDD can work. It's the behavior of the system that you're explaining. So there shouldn't be a problem. You can write your BDD test for any kind of system. There is no restriction towards it.
Another one is, how can we specify detailed requirements in BDD, because different platforms can implement the same requirement differently?
Okay, detailed requirements. Now, again, you have to be very careful. It's the story that you're going to focus on. Now, the stories that you write or the ones that you tell has to have just enough information. Too much information is too bad. Too less information is also bad. Try having just enough information and just in time. That's the key. Any stories that has a lot of details, and if you're writing that details upfront, it can become stale. It has to be current, it has to be validated, and that has to satisfy the definition of ready when it goes into the sprint planning. So don't build it as a requirements document having 50 or 100 kinds of acceptance criteria or writing a large epic. Be very careful about that. Work on splitting your user stories. That's the key thing. Refinement session will help you do that. It's not an official event, but refinement session can start helping you refine your stories, split your stories, use techniques to split the stories. You've got a technique called spider, where you can split the stories using spikes. It could be a paths. So what path the story is going to go through. You can split that across them. You can also do it through interface. You can do it through data, What kind of based on the data, you can split your story. Spider, SPIDR, and R is through rules. What are the business rules? You can use that. So there's quite a lot of techniques to do, but try and follow the spider technique if you want to write stories. That's a fantastic way of actually starting off. You can split your stories. You have to make sure your stories follow the invest criteria. It has to be independent, measurable as well, and it has to provide value. The business value is key. What value it provides. You could be building products. You could be building products with hundreds of features, but only 20% provides value. So focus on that. That's important.
Another question up is, should UI and functional features be kept in separate user story?
No. Try not to split your user stories with UI, with middle layer, with API. No. That is one of the biggest drawbacks that most of us do. I've been in this situation. I've worked in several projects. People split things across. No. Even if you don't have a UI, it's fine. Even if it's the most basic UI, even with the smaller buttons, it's fine. Your story should move across all the layers. When I say layers, the presentation layer, the business logic layer, the data layer, the API, your story has to flow through those layers. That's the key. When you write a story, focus on the entire stack. Don't separate the UI. You're going to have a tough time in your future sprints. When you start integrating everything, it's going to break. You will not be able to satisfy, and you will not be able to achieve your goal. So keep this in mind. Try not to split a front-end team, a back-end team, a middle layer team. No. Use teams. You want to work on multiple teams, it's fine. Have small teams. It's fine. But build that coordination. Build that coordination. If you have a small Scrum team, this is what I do in my ScrumAtScale class. We have small teams. You build a reference model, unblock all your agility, and then you start scaling across the organization. Start building. You can build hundreds of teams, thousands of teams. There's no problem because it's a scale-free architecture. It will not break. Just like your internet. When you build based on that, your stability is going to be strong. You're going to have a solid foundation. That's important. Try and avoid writing stories for UI, for APIs. No, keep that in mind, please. Yeah.
Okay, next one up. Bear with me. Does refining mean adding information to the tickets?
Refining. Okay. Now, refining can be one. Yes, adding information to the ticket is fine. Refining is also, it's a session where everybody meets. It could be a few members of your development team. That is your Scrum, one tester, one developer. And it also can have a few people from external areas like architects or DevOps or anybody who comes in. You can talk about your stories. You can talk about what can we do if there is an ambiguity, discuss about that. If there's a confusion, if there's a dependency, talk about those things. Discuss unless and until it is ready, unless and until you understand. That's why we call a definition of ready and a definition of done. Definition of ready is when your product backlog is refined and it's ready for it to go into your sprint planning. Don't use your sprint planning to start refining your stories. You will then spend days in your sprint planning. It'll be more of a marathon. I've seen teams spending days in the sprint planning, refining. No. Try and do it 1 hour or 2 hours in a week sprint. Yeah, that should be enough.
Next question that we have is, okay, we've answered that one. Well, who defines the acceptance criteria, the business or the product owner?
Yeah. So the acceptance criteria, you can discuss that. You can refine it. Everybody has the opportunity, but the product owner comes up with the basic understanding of the vision. He puts things up, but you can have everybody to contribute towards that and then agree on it. Vote for it.
Next question up is, you mentioned stories are better sliced vertically. If the story point for this story is too large, how do you slice?
Take small stories. So when I say slice, take small stories. You don't need to have try not to take a 13 pointer or a 20 pointer. Yeah, try to focus on small stories. The whole essence of having a story point is you have to take, for example, if your velocity is say 40 or 50 per sprint, the the amount of effort that the whole team can spend in a day should be based on your story points. Just calculate and see. It can't be more than 8 or 5 or 6 story points because your average is 50. In 9 days, you wouldn't complete. So try and have if a story exceeds 8 or 13, try and see if it can be split or what can happen, how this can be achieved. But it's not necessary that because you're going through the entire stack from the presentation to the middle layer to the API layer, the story is going to be large. No, you can do a simple story. You can apply a minimal UI. I don't want you to do a complete UI. You can apply a minimal UI. You can apply a minimal data. Now, you could just start off with saying, I want to do username, password. I can just start with username. I can have a simple story for username. Then I can do another story for password and then start integrating things. So, but then try to do the UI bit for the username, have a field for it, have a button for it, have in the data layer, try to have some database fields, have an API that with a user table that can say add user and a username. Try to do that. Do the entire flow. Then start adding extra fields. Try going towards the breadth of your user story. Yeah, the breadth. When I say breadth, what is the most required functionality? Go towards the breadth. The depth can be later. They are just the could haves, or they're like they may be required or not required. What are the must haves? And try to see, focus on the breadth.
Next one up is,
Yeah.
should there be guidelines upfront on how a ticket is written and who writes what?
The guidelines.
Yeah, guidelines of upfront of how a ticket is written and who writes what?
So the basic template, recommended template, is what I've mentioned. Talk about the who, what, and the why as a role, the action and the behavior, the business value and the outcome. That's one of the key things. That's the most and the widely used template. Try not to make your user story more of a task oriented. So what I've observed in most of my uh, other workplaces and in other client places, I've seen that you just write a two liner or a one liner with just vague description that doesn't make any sense. So try and use this template, and that will help you. That's one of the things I can recommend. As a user, I want to do this so that I can get something out of it.
Okay, next one up is explaining spike. What spike is?
Okay, a spike. A spike can be something that you want to gain knowledge about. It could be something about an unknown system. It can be something about a dependency that I want to learn from the other teams. So it could be a spike, it could be anything. And it's a spike. When you have a spike, so you have a large story, and that cannot be done if it's because you have to finish that spike. Yeah? So raise a card, have a spike for it, spend some time. Now you got to time box your spike. As a team, you discuss and spend some time. You could say 10 hours to do the spike. And if you haven't gained the knowledge, the team again reevaluates, rediscusses, they discuss again to find out if the spike is done or they have to give some more time to it. You could spend another 5 hours or another 6 hours on it. And if once the knowledge is gained, then you go back to the story that is there, reevaluate the story and re-estimate that story because you have finished the spike. Now you're going back to the actual story that actually generated the spike. Take that story, re-estimate it, and talk about it. There could be an estimation. It could come down or it could go up, and then you could start splitting the stories.
Okay, another question is, how does one separate business process related stories from system functional stories, or should all be merged?
Business. Sorry, just can I repeat? Can you repeat the
How
question?
does one separate business process related stories from system functional stories, or should all be merged?
So a story is an end-to-end requirement. It goes from the top to the end, start to the end. Now, if you're trying to introduce system level testing and different things, system level, business level, no. If you implement BDD along with your user stories, that would satisfy the entire criteria. I hope I've answered this question. Uh, can you type in the question again? So if we will have a look at it and we'll see if we can add more details to it.
Okay, so you want me to type it out for you?
Just
Oh,
we've got only a couple of minutes, so we can keep that and we can probably
yeah. We
more details.
start it.
Yeah, we'll start that.
So let's start. So next one is if we don't split the stories, how can it be achieved in a single sprint?
If we don't split the story now,
Yes, how can it be achieved in a
okay,
single sprint?
okay, how could it be achieved in a single sprint? It's the team that commits. So what, depending on your velocity, depending on your average velocity for the last three sprints, your team has to decide whether they can commit to a story. Now, a team has to first understand if it is capable of doing a set of stories in that sprint. Now, if you have the confusion, if you're not clear, then don't take that story that doesn't satisfy your definition of ready. Try and go and reevaluate it, go and re-estimate it. Talk in your refinement session. Not all stories need to be split. Not all stories should be broken down. Some can be, some may not. So it depends on the situation and the kind of situation and the stories you're working on. Now, in the stories, you have two types. There's a complex story and a compound story. 99% of the story that we work on is compound stories that can be split, and very few, very rare cases are the complex stories. That's the 1% or 2%.
Should your story include technical details?
To Okay, adding technical details can be, I would advise a story to have tasks. You can have your technical details there. So try to have tasks. So you can have your tech task, you can have your dev tasks, you can have your QA tasks, you can have all your tasks there. You can have as many number of tasks you want. But in your stories, make sure everybody can understand, everybody looks at it, the story is understandable, the acceptance criteria is clear, it's not got any Java code or Ruby code in it. So people don't get confused. What is that? And try to make it as simple as possible. You can have your task. You can have your task below that.
What is code refactoring?
Code refactoring. Okay, that's a very interesting question. Now, why do you want to refactor? The main reason to refactor is you are in a situation where you've already built a few things, and that requires to be refactored or remodified or rewritten, and that is going to provide some value. Now, refactoring is sometimes expensive. The product owner needs to be convinced that this refactoring activity by the developer will add value, and it will take us or increase our velocity from X amount to X plus certain percentage. That's the key you have to remember. You need to convince a product owner to negotiate and to allocate some percentage of your velocity to do this activity. Your refactoring will work only then. If you're just refactoring your code without providing any business value, then the product owner will not prioritize it. So it will go to the bottom of the list and never get prioritized. So explain the business value and explain what is going to add to the system. If it's going to increase the performance, if it's going to increase your it's going to accelerate and fix a lot of bugs, then go for it. Refactor your code. Yeah.
How do you make a team understand the user story pointing technique, which does not have an agile background?
Okay.
Goes on further to say, please provide a simple example which can be used.
So one of the simplest way of estimating story points is poker planning or you can use t-shirt sizes. Yeah. So t-shirt sizes is more high level. Use large, medium, small, XL. That's one way of doing it. So if you want to get a high level, do a t-shirt sizing exercise. We call that affinity estimation. Get your cards in place, talk about it. Based on the complexity, start measuring it based on the t-shirt sizing. Now, you want to go a bit deeper, you want to get granular estimation, use affinity estimation. Apart from, you can use a poker planning. A poker planning is using the Fibonacci series numbers. You have a set of cards. It starts from 1, 3, 5, and goes on to 8, 13. You can get your team, educate your team to understand a smaller story and a larger story. So you create a base and a reference card. So you could say this is a 3-pointer story and this is a 8-pointer or a 13-pointer. And when you estimate a story, can you see if it is closer to 3-pointer or is it closer to the 8-pointer or to the 13-pointer? So whatever your reference card is. And based on the complexity, remember, it's based on the complexity. It's not the QA doing separately, the dev doing separately. No, it's based on the complexity of the story card. That is important. Of the implementation, that's important. The complexity. How complex is it to do this, or to deliver this? The team decides this completely. So keep the reference card and ask your team to start estimating. Now remember, don't segregate the efforts between dev and test and say this is going to be 3 points for dev, 5 points for test. No. As a team, everybody estimates together, and they also have to justify why they're given a higher estimation and a lower estimation. Discuss. Repeat it once, repeat it twice till everybody agrees. Yeah. Do this process. Poker planning would be the best thing to do. And it's quite interesting. Try and facilitate it with high level energy, and it's going to add value to your team.
Next one up is grooming and refining. The same.
Grooming and
refining.
Yeah, so grooming is no longer a word. Femi, you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Nobody uses that anymore because it has a bad connotation to it.
Sure. I think it's refinement is the word that's being used now. So remember, there's in Scrum you have 3, 5, 3. 3 roles, 5 events, and 3 artifacts. And the product backlog refinement session is not an official event. So you can't say there's 6. It's a 5 plus 1. So you have this refinement session happens before the next sprint starts. So you can add that across you have to spread that refinement session, maybe 1 hour in the first week and 1 hour in the second week. And also if you are a new team, try and do an upfront product backlog refinement session. It could take half a day or 1 day to get that done before you can start your sprints. We've got 2 more minutes. Let's fire up a few more questions. Yeah, rapid questions, please.
Another question is, what is an ideal composition that you might suggest for a BDD Scrum team? How many developers and how many testers?
Okay, the Scrum guide suggests a team size between 3 and 9. That's the optimal size they suggest. But based on the business Harvard Business Review, 4.6 is the recommended size, is what they mentioned. So 5 is a good team size for a Scrum team with a product owner and a Scrum Master, dedicated product owner and a Scrum Master. Now, the ratio between the developers and testers, that depends on your context, your culture, your environment, how you decide. It depends on what you're doing. But if you're having multiple Scrum teams, try to keep an optimal size, 5 or 6, that's it. Don't have an army of people standing around in a stand-up, having 10, 20 people and doing a stand-up for like 30 minutes and doing a planning session for like 1 day. No. Maintain the small team size. Small and stable teams, remember, small and stable teams. That's important.
And also try to make sure that your developers and your QA guys are cross-functional in the sense that they are learning off each other, so that if a particular skill set is not available, the QA guy can say, okay, I've done some development, I know it's all about ramping up really, so that they can learn from each other. So there shouldn't really be developer and QA separate, because that is basically, for me, that's mini waterfalls in hands-on there.
And it's the most important thing is when you build your team, you focus on the T shapes. Yeah. So as you said, Femi, it's the breadth of knowledge and the depth of knowledge you have.
Yes.
What you can focus on doing 90% to 100%, and plus what you can learn and teach others. You're a specialist and you are a generalist as well. You can do this. Yes, that's very important. We are. Does any
7 o'clock.
Yeah,
I have one more. Should we manage just one more question if we can make it, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Is complexity in any way related to time to develop a story?
No, don't focus on time. See, complexity is the complexity, the way that card or that story, that functionality, the amount of time it takes to do, or it could be the amount of the complex system it's got in. So now, if you focus on time, say if I say if the card is going to take me 5 days, 10 days, then it's complex. No, I could do a small change somewhere, and that's going to take me 5 days to test. I'm not saying it's complex. The effort is more, but I don't want to say it's complex. So the complexity cannot be directly proportional to your time that it takes for you to do. No, it's the way the system is built, what you're going to do, what is the effort you're going to actually add to it. That's the key.
Okay.
Okay.
That's the list of questions. So over to you, Mohammed.
Okay. Thank you all for attending this webinar. Hope this was useful. Please stay in touch, stay safe, stay at home, take care. Thank you, everybody. I know a lot of people who joined from different time zones. Thank you, and I know it's late. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to record the session, and this is going to go on YouTube and also on my website, www.efficientagile.com. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending. See you. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Gone.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks a lot. I had to.
Thank you. Thanks.
See him.
Yeah.
She was going.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.
Again. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mohammed, are you going to send the slide pack or recording link?
So I'm going to share the recordings across on the sites. So it will take some time for me to upload. So I'll share the slides as well.
Not in a hurry. I was just wondering whether the meetup will get the link.
Yes, definitely. You'll get the link. I'll post it across to everybody. Yeah.
Thank you. It was a good session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Speak later.
Speak later. Bye-bye.